Hey, my name's Nathan. I'm 24, and I work as a laborer on a construction site just outside New York City in the Bronx. It's not the kind of job you dream about as a kid, but it pays the rent on my tiny studio apartment, keeps food in the fridge, and leaves just enough for a couple of beers at the end of the week. I've been at it for 3 years now, hauling bricks, mixing concrete, sweating through long days under the sun, or worse, the rain. My hands are calloused, my boots are always caked with dust, and I like it that way. It's honest work. Keeps my head clear. I live alone in a one-room place above a laundromat. It smells like detergent most days, and the walls are thin enough to hear my neighbor's TV blaring game shows at night. I don't have much: a mattress, a secondhand couch, a microwave that hums too loud. No family around anymore. My parents passed a few years back, and my sister's out in California chasing her own life. I don't mind the solitude, though. There's something about coming home to a quiet room knowing no one's going to ask anything of you. I used to dream bigger design school sketching buildings, maybe even houses with big windows and open yards. But tuition was a wall I couldn't climb, so I let it go. Buried it somewhere deep. That night the sky was falling apart. Rain came down in sheets, the kind that soaks you in seconds and makes the streets look like rivers. I was at an ATM near a bus stop, pulling out my last 20 bucks for the week. The machine was slow, spitting out cash like it was doing me a favor. That's when I saw her. She was standing under the bus stop shelter, but it wasn't doing much good. The wind whipped the rain sideways, and she was shivering, clutching a soggy paper bag that was starting to tear at the seams. Her dark hair was plastered to her face, and her shirt, an old button-up too big for her, clung to her shoulders. She looked tired, not just from the rain, but from something heavier, something that sat in her eyes. I don't know why I stopped. I'm not the guy who goes out of his way to play hero. But something about her made me pause. I zipped up my jacket, walked over, and stood under the shelter, keeping a respectful distance. "You okay?" I asked, raising my voice over the rain. She looked up, and for a second I thought she might ignore me. Her eyes were brown deep, like they held more than she was willing to say. "I don't know where to go," she said, her voice soft but steady, like she was trying to hold herself together. "My phone's gone. Drop my wallet somewhere. Can you help me?" I hesitated. I mean, who wouldn't, a stranger late at night in the rain? But her face wasn't asking for pity. It was just asking for something. Anything. "I've got a place nearby," I said, scratching the back of my neck. "It's not much, but it's dry. You can figure things out from there." She nodded almost too quickly, like she didn't want to think too hard about it. "Thank you," she said, and her voice had this quiet weight, like she meant it more than I could understand. The walk to my apartment was short, maybe 10 minutes, but it felt longer with the rain pounding, and neither of us saying much. I held my jacket over her head, even though it didn't do much good. She clutched that torn bag like it was all she had left. When we got to my building, I led her up the creaky stairs to my door. The laundromat's hum vibrated faintly through the floor. I flicked on the light, and my place looked even smaller than usual. One room, a mattress in the corner, a folding chair by a wobbly table. "I'm Nathan, by the way," I said, tossing my wet jacket over the chair. "Marissa," she said, standing just inside the door like she wasn't sure if she should stay. Her eyes scanned the room, not judging, just taking it in. I grabbed a spare blanket and a pillow from the closet, handed them to her. "You can take the bed. I'll crash on the floor." She shook her head like she was about to argue, but then just said, "You're kind. Kinder than most." I shrugged, not knowing what to say to that. I didn't feel kind, just human. As I lay on the floor that night listening to the rain and her soft breathing across the room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had just shifted. I had no idea who she really was. But I knew one thing: the woman sleeping on my mattress wasn't just someone who needed help. There was more to her. A lot more. The next morning, I woke to the smell of something I hadn't smelled in my apartment in years: actual food. Not the burnt toast I usually managed or the stale cereal I'd eat straight from the box. It was eggs, maybe, and something else: coffee, real coffee, not the instant stuff I kept in a jar. I blinked, disoriented, my back stiff from sleeping on the floor. The blanket I'd given Marissa was neatly folded on the mattress, and she was already up, moving around my tiny kitchen like she belonged there. I sat up, rubbing my eyes. Marissa stood by the stove wearing one of my old flannel shirts I'd left on the chair. It was too big for her. The sleeves rolled up to her elbows and her damp hair from last night's rain was tied back in a loose knot. She looked different in the morning light, less fragile, more deliberate, like she decided to take up space. She was flipping eggs in my only frying pan, the one I hadn't touched in months. A couple of slices of bread ones I thought had gone stale were toasting in the microwave's grill setting. She'd even found my ancient coffee pot, the one buried in a cupboard, since my mom's last visit. "You're up," she said, glancing over with a small smile. Her voice was calm, almost warm, but there was something in it, a steadiness that didn't match the soaked, shivering woman from last night. "I hope you don't mind. I raided your fridge. You had, what, 3 eggs and half a loaf of bread? Not much to work with." I stood, stretching my aching shoulders. "Didn't know I had eggs," I said, half joking. "Thought they went bad weeks ago." "They were close," she said, flipping an egg with a flick of her wrist. "But not quite. Sit. Breakfast's almost ready." I hesitated, then pulled out the folding chair at my wobbly table. It felt strange having someone cook in my space. I wasn't used to it, not the food, not the company. She set a plate in front of me, 2 eggs sunny side up and a piece of toast with a smear of butter she must have found in some corner of my fridge. She poured coffee into a chipped mug and slid it my way, then sat across from me with her own plate. "Thanks," I said, picking up a fork. "You didn't have to do this. You didn't have to let me stay." She countered, her eyes meeting mine for a moment before she looked down at her food. "Figured I'd make myself useful." We ate in silence for a bit, the only sounds the scrape of forks and the faint hum of the laundromat downstairs. I watched her, trying not to stare. She wasn't just pretty. There was something about the way she moved, the way she held her fork, precise but not fussy. Like she'd done this 100 times, but not in a place like mine. I remembered what she'd said last night, lost her job, her home split with her partner. It didn't add up, not entirely. She didn't seem broken, not like someone who'd lost everything. She seemed in control. "How long you been living like this?" she asked, breaking the silence. Her eyes flicked around my apartment, the bare walls, the single light bulb dangling from the ceiling. 3 years, I said, shrugging, since my parents passed. "It's not much, but it's quiet. That's enough for me." She nodded, taking a sip of coffee. Her gaze lingered on me long enough to make me shift in my seat. "Not everyone who lives simply is poor," she said, her voice low, almost like she was thinking out loud. "Sometimes they're just keeping their heart intact." I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. It was the kind of thing you'd read in a book, not here over eggs in a dump like my place. "Yeah, well," I said, trying to laugh it off, "my heart's doing fine. Just don't ask it to pay rent." She smiled, but it was small, like she knew something I didn't. We finished eating, and I told her she could stay a few days if she needed to figure things out. "No pressure," I said. "I'm at the site most of the day. You'd have the place to yourself." Marissa didn't answer right away. She just looked at me, her brown eyes searching like she was weighing something heavy. "Okay," she said, finally nodding. "Thank you, Nathan." That night, after I got back from the construction site, my clothes dusted with cement and my hands sore, I found the apartment cleaner than it had been in years. The dishes were done, the counter wiped, even my pile of laundry was folded. Marissa was sitting on the mattress reading an old paperback I'd forgotten I owned, a beat-up thriller from a thrift store. She looked up when I walked in, and for a second I forgot how tired I was. But later, when I was brushing my teeth, I heard it. A soft sound barely there, coming from the bathroom. I stepped closer, ear to the door. It was her, crying so quiet it was like she didn't want the world to know. My hand hovered over the knob. I didn't know what to do. Knock, walk away, pretend I didn't hear. Before I could decide, the door opened. Marissa stood there, eyes red but dry now, her face composed again. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at me. Then, in a voice so small it barely carried, she said, "Can you give me a hug?" I didn't speak. I just opened my arms and she stepped into them. Her body was warm, tense, like she'd been holding herself together for too long. It wasn't a weak kind of trembling, it was the kind of strength that's been stretched thin. I held her, my chin resting on her hair, and for a moment I felt something shift. Not sparks, not some movie moment, just a quiet understanding that she wasn't just a stranger I'd helped. There was something deeper here, something I couldn't name yet. When she pulled back, she gave me a faint smile. "Thank you," she said, and slipped past me to the mattress. I stood there, my heart thumping, wondering what the hell I'd just stepped into. The next 4 days were the strangest, most peaceful ones I'd had in years. Marissa stayed, and somehow my cramped little apartment above the laundromat didn't feel so small anymore. It wasn't like we planned it, she just didn't leave, and I didn't ask her to. We fell into a rhythm like we'd been sharing space forever. I'd head out to the construction site at dawn, my boots crunching on gravel, the city waking up around me. Marissa would be there when I got back, the faint smell of detergent from downstairs, mixing with whatever she'd cooked up from the scraps in my fridge. She had a knack for making something out of nothing: pasta from a half-empty box, a salad from wilted lettuce I'd forgotten about. It was like she could see potential where I saw junk. One evening, I came home to find her wrestling with the kitchen sink. The faucet had been leaking for weeks, a steady drip I'd learned to ignore. Marissa, though, wasn't the ignoring type. She was crouched on the floor, my rusty toolbox open beside her, a wrench in one hand and a determined look on her face. Her hair was tied back with a rubber band she'd found somewhere, and she was wearing another of my old shirt sleeves, rolled up a smudge of grime on her cheek. "You're gonna flood the place," I said, dropping my work bag by the door. She glanced up, half laughing. "It's already a mess. Figured I'd try fixing it before it drowns us both." I knelt beside her, taking the wrench. "Move over, city girl. You're holding it wrong." I showed her how to tighten the pipe, my hands guiding hers. The faucet sputtered, sprayed water in our faces, and we both fell back, laughing so hard it echoed off the walls. For a second, I forgot she was a stranger I'd picked up in the rain. She felt like someone I'd known my whole life. "Nice job, plumber," she teased, wiping water from her cheek. "You should put that on your resume." "Yeah, right," I said, grinning. "Construction pays better than pipes." We cleaned up the mess and she handed me a towel, her fingers brushing mine. It wasn't much, but it sent a jolt through me like the air had thickened. I looked away, focusing on the sink, but I could feel her eyes on me. That night we sat on the tiny balcony outside my apartment, really just a concrete slab with a rusted railing. I dragged out 2 folding chairs, and we shared a 6-pack of cheap beer I'd grabbed from the corner store. The Bronx hummed below us, cars honking, a dog barking somewhere, the distant wail of a siren. Marissa leaned back, her legs stretched out, the beer can resting on her knee. She looked at ease, but there was something else, something heavy in the way she stared at the skyline. "What's your deal, Nathan?" she asked, her voice soft but curious. "You're out here working your hands raw, living in a shoebox. What do you want?" I took a sip of beer, the question catching me off guard. Nobody asked me that, not in a way that felt like they cared. "I don't know," I said, staring at the can. "Used to want to design stuff. Houses, buildings, you know. Had this dream of sketching places people could call home, but school was too expensive and life, it just happened." She nodded like she understood more than I'd said. "You ever think about picking it up again?" "The sketching?" I shrugged. "What's the point? Dreams like that don't pay bills." She turned to me, her eyes sharp in the dim light. "Not everything's about paying bills. Some things are about keeping you alive inside." Her words hit harder than I expected, like she'd seen straight through the walls I'd built. "There are people out there who'd want what you gave up on," she added, quieter now. "You just have to believe it's worth trying." I didn't know what to say. Her voice had this weight, like she wasn't just talking about me. It was too knowing, too polished for someone who'd lost everything. I wanted to ask more, but something stopped me. Instead, I handed her another beer and we sat in silence, the city breathing around us. The next day, she started asking about my sketches. I dug out an old notebook from a box under my bed, one I hadn't touched in years. The pages were filled with half-finished designs, houses with wide porches, apartments with big windows. Marissa flipped through them, her fingers careful, like she was holding something fragile. "These are good," she said, not in a patronizing way, but like she meant it. "You've got something here, Nathan." I brushed it off, embarrassed. "Just doodles, nothing special." She closed the notebook, her gaze steady. "They're special if they're yours." That night we talked more. She told me about her past, a job in advertising. She said she'd lost a husband who'd cheated and left her with nothing. Her voice was steady, but there were cracks, moments where her eyes drifted like she was editing the story as she went. I listened, not pushing, but I couldn't shake the feeling she was holding something back. Her gestures, her words, they were too precise, too graceful for someone who'd hit rock bottom. By the fourth night, we were sitting on the balcony again, the air cooler, now the beer replaced with instant coffee she'd made in my chipped mugs. She leaned her head on my shoulder just for a moment and said, "You're easy to be around, Nathan. Not many people are." I felt my chest tighten. Not because it was romantic, but because it was real. Too real. I didn't know who she was, not really, but I knew one thing these days with her were the first time in years I didn't feel alone. And that scared me more than I could admit. I woke up on the fifth morning to an apartment that felt too quiet. The usual hum of the laundromat downstairs was there, but something was off. The mattress was empty, the blanket folded neatly at the foot. Marissa wasn't in the kitchen, wasn't on the balcony. For a second, I thought she'd left, slipped out in the night without a word. My chest tightened at the idea, a strange ache I hadn't expected. Then I heard the bathroom door creak open and she stepped out. I froze. This wasn't the Marissa I'd spent 4 days with. Gone was the oversized flannel, the messy hair, the tired woman I'd found in the rain. She was wearing a sleek black blazer over a white silk blouse-tailored pants that hugged her frame and low heels that clicked softly on my cheap linoleum floor. Her hair was pulled into a tight, elegant bun, and her makeup was subtle but sharp lipstick, the color of wine eyeliner that made her brown eyes look even deeper. She looked like she'd stepped out of a boardroom, not my rundown apartment. A leather bag hung over her shoulder, and she held a phone I hadn't seen before, its screen glowing as she typed something quickly. "Morning," she said, her voice calm but different, polished, like she was addressing a meeting. She glanced at me and her expression softened, but only for a moment. "I didn't mean to startle you. What's going on?" I asked, my voice rougher than I meant. I stood still in my sweatpants, feeling suddenly small in my own place. "You look different." She set her bag on the table, the one we'd eaten pasta on 2 nights ago, and took a deep breath. "I owe you an apology, Nathan," she said. "I haven't been entirely honest." My stomach dropped. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, bracing myself. "What do you mean?" She met my eyes steady, unflinching. "I'm not who you think I am. My name is Marissa Holt, and I'm the CEO of Holt Media. I wasn't homeless. I didn't lose my job or my wallet. I was conducting an experiment, a project to understand trust and kindness in people, young people like you. And I chose you." Her words hit like a punch, sharp and disorienting. I stared at her, trying to process it. "You're saying you lied about everything? The rain, the crying, the whole damn story about your husband?" "Not everything," she said, quickly stepping closer. "The emotions were real. The moments we shared, those were real. But yes, I fabricated the situation. I needed to see how someone would respond to a stranger in need. And you, Nathan, you didn't just help me. You gave me a place to stay, no questions asked. You have a heart that doesn't compromise, and that's rare." I laughed, but it was bitter hollow. "So I'm what a lab rat. You played me to test some corporate theory?" My voice rose and I could feel my hands shaking. I thought of the eggs she'd cooked, the way she'd leaned on my shoulder, the hug in the bathroom. Had that all been fake? Part of her game? "It wasn't a game," she said, her voice firm but not defensive. "I run a company that thrives on understanding people, what motivates them, what makes them human. I've met hundreds of people in my work, but you're different. You didn't help me for gain. You didn't ask for anything. That's why I stayed longer than I planned." I shook my head, turning away. "You could have told me. Day one, you could have said something. Instead, you let me think you were—" I trailed off, not even sure what word to use. "Broken, lost." "Like me, I'm sorry," she said, and I could hear the sincerity, but it didn't erase the sting. I didn't expect to feel what I felt. Those days with you, they changed me too. I looked at her standing there in her perfect blazer, her perfect world, and felt the gap between us widen. She wasn't the woman who'd needed my blanket. She was someone who could buy my entire building without blinking. "You should go," I said, my voice low. "You got what you came for." She didn't argue. She picked up her bag, pulled out a sleek business card, and placed it on the table. "If you ever want to pick up designing again, send me your first sketch." "I mean that, Nathan." Not because of the project, but because I believe in you. I didn't touch the card, didn't look at her. She walked to the door, her heels clicking, and paused. "Thank you," she said softly, "for seeing me even when I wasn't honest." The door closed behind her and the apartment felt emptier than it ever had. I went back to work that day hauling bricks under the gray sky, but my head wasn't in it. I kept replaying her words, her face, the way she'd looked at me like I was more than a laborer in a dead-end job. But I also saw the lie, the way she'd let me believe she was someone she wasn't. I didn't call her, didn't text the number on that card. I went to bed each night staring at the ceiling, missing the sound of her quiet breathing across the room. Not because she was a CEO, not because of her world. Because for 4 days she'd made mine feel full. A week after Marissa walked out of my apartment, life went back to its old rhythm, or at least it tried to. I hauled bricks at the construction site, the Bronx sun beating down on my neck, the dust settling into my boots like it always did. My apartment was quiet again. Too quiet, the laundromat's hum the only sound filling the space. I'd left her business card on the table untouched, its crisp edges, a reminder of the gap between her world and mine. I told myself I was fine, that those 4 days were just a strange blip, a story I'd tell myself years from now when the sting had faded. But every night lying on my mattress, I saw her face, those deep brown eyes, the way she'd leaned on my shoulder, the way her voice had cracked when she asked for a hug. It wasn't her title or her blazer that kept me awake. It was the way she'd made me feel seen, like I was more than the guy swinging a hammer. Then the package arrived. It was a Tuesday late afternoon and I found it sitting outside my door when I got home, a plain cardboard box with my name scrawled in neat handwriting. No return address, just a postmark from Manhattan. I carried it inside my hand, still gritty from work, and set it on the table next to her card. My heart thudded as I cut the tape, not sure what I expected. Inside was a sleek black case, the kind artists use to carry their tools. I opened it to find a set of drawing pencils, charcoal, and a sketch pad, the paper thick and clean, not like the cheap notebooks I'd used years ago. Tucked under the pad was a folded note, her handwriting unmistakable. "Don't think just because you're ordinary you can't create something extraordinary. I'm still waiting for your first drawing. Marissa." I sat there staring at the note, my throat tight. The words blurred as my eyes stung, and for the first time in years I let myself cry. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet release, like something heavy was finally slipping off my shoulders. I thought about the rain-soaked night I'd found her, the eggs she'd cooked, the way she'd looked at my old sketches like they mattered. I'd been angry when she told me the truth, felt like a pawn in her experiment. But this box, this note wasn't part of any project. It was her reaching out, believing in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. That night I didn't sleep. I pulled my ancient laptop from under the bed, the one I hadn't opened in months. It groaned to life, the screen flickering as I downloaded a free design program I used to mess around with in high school. My hands shook as I started sketching a simple house. Nothing grand, just a small place, with wide windows and a porch, the kind I'd always wanted to build. It wasn't perfect. The lines uneven, my skills rusty from years of neglect. But as I drew, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: possibility. I thought about Marissa, about what she'd said that first morning, keeping your heart intact. I'd spent years thinking simple was enough, that dreams were for people with deeper pockets or bigger lives. But she'd seen something in me, something I'd buried under concrete and routine. I didn't know if I'd ever see her again, didn't know if I'd have the nerve to send her that sketch. But sitting there, pencil in hand, I realized it wasn't just about her. It was about me, about picking up the pieces of a dream I'd left behind. I sealed the sketch in an envelope, her card's address printed carefully on the front. I didn't write a letter, didn't explain. Just the drawing, a quiet thank you for what she'd given me, not just a place to stay in her world, but a reason to step back into mine. As I dropped it in the mailbox, the city buzzing around me, I felt lighter. Not because I expected an answer, but because I'd started again. Marissa was gone back to her high-rise office, her world of glass and steel. But if our paths crossed again, I knew one thing. I wouldn't be the same guy she'd met under that bus stop shelter. I'd be someone who'd taken a chance not just on her, but on himself. And that was enough.